Hello, everybody. Happy Easter. Hope everybody had a good Easter break, and I hope that you have fully gotten into this routine now. And I hope everybody is seeing these videos all right and that you are doing the assignments. So, without further ado, let's continue. We have finished our president's unit, and I'm going to move on into the Westward expansion unit. So, this lecture is titled Into the West, and it covers SOLs 8A, 8B, and 8C. So before we continue, we left off with President Monroe in the 1820s, and we're going to back up a little bit to the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. But before we do that, I need to talk about the population boom. So in 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, there was about 2.5 million people living in the 13 colonies. Now that probably sounds like a lot. After all, there's only about 5,500 people in the city of Covington, roughly 6,000 to 7,000 people in Allegheny County. But it's not that many people compared to today. 2.5 million isn't. So we didn't stay that few people for long. There was a population boom. Now, a boom is when something explodes. It explodes outward. Now, it doesn't have to be an explosion. That's just anything whose numbers grow. An economic boom is when everybody is making lots of money. More money is being made. A population boom is when you have a bigger population. Population is how many people you had. So this is a list of census numbers from 1790 to 1850. Now the census is when the government counts how many people are in this country. And they do that every year that ends with a zero. This year is 2020, and we are doing a census right now. I have already sent in my census, and I'm assuming most of your parents have already sent in their census saying there's one or two parents here, and there's 4, 5, 6, 7 kids here. So remember, in 1776, there were 2.5 million people. In 1790, there were 3.9 million people. 10 years later, 5.2 million people. 10 years later, 7 million people. So we increased almost 2 million in 10 years. 10 years later, in 1820, there were 10 million people. So 3 million, that is a 3 million people increase. 1830, we have 12.7 million. In 1840, we have 17 million, so almost a 5 million people increase. And in 1850, a 23 million people in this country. So our population grew 10 times the size. So 2.5 million all the way to 23 million, almost 10 times the amount of people are in this country in 1850 as opposed to 1776. Today, and as you were wondering, there were 328,653,000 people in this country. I think, and I'm not 100% on this, but I think we are fourth or fifth in population. The pictures you're seeing are of Times Square in New York, our most populous city. I think there's 8 or 9 million people just in the city of New York. In case you're wondering, the most populous country is China, second is India. The United States is either 3 or 4. Now, to hold all of these new people, they started moving west. If you remember, the 13 colonies were already settled, but the rest of the country was not. And we owned from Appalachia, right here, to the Mississippi River, right here was not settled. So they started moving, these new people started moving into these areas, and we got new states. Vermont, here in green, was the 14th state, and it joined the Union in 1791. The 15th state was Kentucky, lost my mouse, down here in green in 1792. Kentucky was originally part of Virginia, but uh, the people in Virginia, the people in Kentucky, they all agreed that it was way too big of a state. So Kentucky broke off from Virginia. Next, we have Tennessee, Ohio, Louisiana, 1812, Indiana, 1816, Mississippi in 1817, Illinois in 1818, Alabama, 1819, Maine, 1820, Missouri, 1821, Arkansas, 1836, Michigan, right here, 1837, Florida in 1845, Iowa, there it is, 1846, Wisconsin, right here, 1848, and California all the way over here in 1840. So before we move on, I want to talk about the idea of manifest destiny. Uh, Manifest destiny was a big idea in the 1800s. Manifest destiny was the belief that America was chosen as the new promised land. If anybody goes to church on a regular basis or reads the Bible stories, in the old stories, there was the belief that God had given the best land in the world to his favorite people, the Israelites. And this new country was called Israel, and that is where they were going to live. Now, the belief of manifest destiny was that America was the new chosen people, and that the United States of America, the middle country in the North American continent, was the best place to live, and that we were destined to control all of North America, from the Atlantic Ocean in the east all the way to the Pacific Ocean in the west. All of this was going to be ours, from sea to shining sea. And this belief drove people westward to claim new lands. Here we have a painting of Manifest Destiny. I want you to take a minute and to just look at the painting. Okay, so normally in class I would ask you to tell me something interesting about the painting. Now, obviously, we have the figure of Destiny right here, and she has two things in her hands. The first thing is a school book, so she is bringing knowledge to the wild places. She also has a power line in her hands, so she is bringing power to the wilderness. Now, there's a clear color difference from the right-hand side and the left-hand side. We can see the right-hand side represents technology, it represents civilization, and it represents light. We see this because it is actually lighter than the left side. The left side represents wilderness. It represents the untamed. It represents the unknown. And the unknown always scares us. And it is colored dark, and we can see that the figure of Destiny is moving to the wilderness. She is bringing the light of civilization and technology to the wild places of America. And we can see that she is driving before her the wilds. Let's see, we have a bear, we have Indians, we have the buffalo, and she seems to be driving all these people west as she is leading Americans with their technology westward. Let's see, over on the right side again, all the way over here, we have what looks like New York, a city. We have two railroads, we have farmers, we have a stagecoach, and we have explorers and pioneers. And this is what Americans believed. They believed that they were bringing the light of technology and civilization to the wild places of North America. Here is another picture that describes Manifest Destiny. I'd like you to look at it for just a minute before I talk about it. All right. So once again, we can see that the people are moving westward. They're moving to the left, and the left represents westward. And we can see that on the right are mountains and people, and it's crowded. It's very crowded. And that's what America was like. The East was very crowded. The West was full of opportunity. Back then, you could just go out into the wilderness, build yourself a house, start a farm, and it would be 5, 10, 20 miles before the next house. Now, some of you probably wouldn't like that. In fact, I don't know if I would like that, and I want to live out in the middle of nowhere. But people back then, they had to grow everything, or they had to hunt everything that they ate. And we can see the guns to protect themselves, but also to feed themselves. And we can see the center of the picture shows what looks like a husband, a dad, and he's pointing to the west. And we have a mother and her two children, and they represent the hope that this is America. You can go anywhere, you can do anything. Nobody's going to tell you how to live your life. If you want something, just go take it. So here is the growth of the United States between 1783 and 1853. We have the original 13 colonies along the Atlantic Ocean in green. And the line between light green and regular green was the proclamation of 1763, the first cause of the Revolutionary War. The light green represents the Treaty of Paris in 1783. So our original country, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, when the Treaty of Paris was signed, when the Revolutionary War ended, was everything between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mississippi River, not including Florida. Florida was originally owned by Spain. Our next big purchase of land, and the biggest purchase of land, as you already know from learning about Thomas Jefferson, was the Louisiana Purchase, bought from France in 1803. And it went all the way to the Rocky Mountains. Did not go all the way to the Pacific Ocean. It went to the Rocky Mountains. Texas and California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Colorado, they were owned by Spain. So we did not purchase them, but we originally got them from Mexico. Mexico declared its war, or declared its independence, and fought a war with Spain the same way we did. And a few years later, we went to war with Mexico, and we conquered all of this from Mexico. And we have the Oregon country out here in dark green. And we got that from Great Britain in 1846. Nobody really owned it, although Great Britain claimed it. Nobody lived there other than the Indians, the Kwakiutl Indians, and they didn't really know about those people. So we got that from Britain, and we got Spain. Got Florida from Spain, and that's a story I'm going to tell you later. So the first thing I'm going to tell you about is the Louisiana Purchase. The Louisiana Purchase was bought in 1803, and it was purchased from France. It was bought by Thomas Jefferson from the Emperor Napoleon. I never told you what happened to the Emperor Napoleon. We won the War of 1812 from Britain, and that was part of the Napoleonic Wars, but Napoleon ended up losing. Britain came in, remade France, and Napoleon ended up being exiled and imprisoned on a little island called Helena, where he died. But we got Louisiana from him, so worked out for us, I guess. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States, as we can see from the green part and the brown part. Now, Thomas Jefferson needed to know what was in Louisiana Territory. Nobody had explored the Louisiana Territory. We had no idea what was in it. So Thomas Jefferson appointed a person named Meriwether Lewis to explore the Louisiana Purchase. And Lewis decided to hire his friend, his best friend, as a co-captain for the expedition, and his name was William Clark. Now, Lewis and Clark spent about a year planning on doing this journey. And to go on this journey, they had to draw maps. They had to learn how to take latitude and longitude without a GPS. They had to learn how to report on animals and plants. They had to learn Indian languages. Remember, not all the Indians spoke the same language. There was Shoshone, Algonquin, Iroquoian. There were all types of languages. And they had to learn as many languages as they could. And they had to take a daily journal. And they had to learn how to be doctors. And they did all of this in a year. And they named themselves the Corps of Discovery. And here is a picture of the boat, of one of the boats they took on the Mississippi River. Now, they were going upriver, which meant they were going against the stream. The stream was coming this way, they were going this way. So it was very hard for them to go. Some days they only made it 5 miles. I believe sometimes they only made it 2 miles a day. I mean, you could walk faster than this, but they couldn't carry all the stuff that they had going with them. And they were helped by a Shoshone Indian named Sacagawea. Now, there are several ways of saying her name, but the name I'm going to say is Sacagawea. And Sacagawea was really the most important person on their journey. She was their guide. Without Sacagawea, Lewis and Clark would not have been able to do what they did. In fact, I know some of you are fond of the Legos that I have on my desk. Here is Lego Sacagawea. And we can see that she's holding a baby. That is because she guided them on their journey with an infant on her back. We can actually see the baby carrier that she's holding right here. She did all of that with an infant on her back. They were helped by several other people. One of them was an African American named York, and we can see right here. And Sacagawea was a very maybe the most famous and important Indian outside of Pocahontas. And in 2000, they actually made a gold coin with her face and the baby that she carried on it. So this coin was worth $1, and we can still get them. They're still around. In fact, I have a huge roll of them I don't know if you can see that, but here we have a roll of Sacagawea gold dollars, and it's pretty heavy. You can hear it when I drop it an inch. So, and there is a statue of Sacagawea. They spoke with 28 different Indian tribes. They climbed mountains. They crossed rivers. They did what nobody else in human history has done. This journey that they did was one of the biggest journeys in human history. We can see them climbing the Rockies and overlooking a lake here. They were the first European Americans and African Americans to cross the Rocky Mountains. I say European and African because the Indians crossed it, but Lewis and Clark were the first of the immigrant Americans to cross the Rocky Mountains. And this is one of the mountains that they crossed. And we can see how high it is and how steep it is and how cold it must have been. They spent 2 years on this journey, and once winter happened, they wintered at a place called Fort Mandan. They actually built a fort and decided to stay there in the winter. Fort Mandan still exists, or at least a reproduction of it exists, and this is what the fort would have looked like in their time. Take a minute and look at these pictures. Now tell me, would you have liked to live there? Not permanently, just for the winter, of course, but it's very cozy. There's a fireplace over here. We can see it's 2 stories because the ladder goes up to the other story. We can see that their blankets are made of fur, that they have candles on the walls and on the table. There's books, guns, antlers, of course, from the food that they shot and killed. It would have been a nice place to live. The floor is wood. So there we go. They walked 4,122 miles to the Pacific Ocean. And they were also believed to be the first of the immigrant Americans to see the Pacific Ocean from the land. And here is a statue of Lewis and Clark. I am going to post a documentary on Lewis and Clark because there is no way I can do this justice. So wait for that. All right. Yes, we made it to the Pacific Ocean. Yay! All right. Lewis and Clark then walked 4,000 miles back. So these three people walked 8,000 miles. I guess 4 because York was with them, although he's not in this statue. Only one person died on the journey. Lewis, Clark, Sacagawea, her baby, and York all survived, and they returned in September of 1802. So it took them just over 2 years. And most people believe this to be the greatest journey ever made by men and women. Here is a carving of a rock that William Clark made. Side note, the middle school that I went to for 6th grade was called William Clark. Here are some of the pictures that William and Clark drew of the animals and plants and Indians that they encountered. Remember, they were required to draw all these things. They couldn't capture them because they couldn't carry them with them, and they couldn't kill them because same way. Also, they decay and wouldn't be used to anybody. So we have a bird and we have a male and female deer. Here we have a vulture, some type of flower. I'm not sure what flower that is. If you think you know what flower that is or what fish that is, because I'm not sure what fish that is, you can comment. Here we have, that is not a Lewis and Clark drawing, but here we have a gopher and a groundhog. Here is bears. Here is a black bear at the bottom and a grizzly bear at the top. And we have a wolf and a bison. Here's a small bird and a hawk. A fox and a hare. And I just want to remind you that all of these drawings were done by Lewis and Clark on their journey. Here is a map that Lewis and Clark made. And they explored all of this. Remember when I had you go out and draw the mountains? I think I did that in October. I had you draw the mountains across from the school from a bird's eye view. This was done the same way. They were looking at the land and they were drawing it like they were above it. All right, we are going to stop here for today. Got 26 and a half minutes on my clock, so that's a good lecture time to stop. I want you to go outside and I want you to draw something. I want you to draw a tree or a flower or an animal if you have one. I want you to pretend that you are on the Lewis and Clark expedition, and I want you to have fun. And I will see you later.